hold your applause. Hello, I'm Sheila Rogers, and I have the honor of being the Chancellor of the University of Victoria. To begin this evening, I would like to acknowledge with respect the living culture, tradition, the history of the Lekwungen-speaking peoples, the Esquimalt, the Songhees, and the Wasanich peoples, on whose land the University of Victoria stands. And with this recognition, I acknowledge their connection to the land that goes back time immemorial. It is wonderful to have the Walrus here and the Walrus talking youth leadership. Many youth leaders, including two speakers we'll hear from tonight, are graduates of the University of Victoria, but everyone else is welcome as well. I love the word convocation. That's what happens here in the Farquhar Auditorium in November and again in June. When we convocate, we are literally calling together. Con is Latin for with or together, and vocare, where vocate comes from, is to call, and at the root of vocare is vox, or voice. And I think what we do here at UVic is to give voice to ideas in an extraordinary environment. Through dynamic learning, often in the field, ideas take form. The world, as our speakers will prove tonight, is interconnected and always evolving, and we believe that learning should be that way as well. We love to ask the question, what if? Everything I mentioned about UVic pertains to the Walrus as well, and not just its magazine, but all its other platforms. It creates space for a dazzling kaleidoscope of perspectives. It's my pleasure now to introduce the executive director and co-publisher of the Walrus, someone I first met at CBC Radio, a place where I've been for about 400 years, and I have known this extraordinary woman for about 150. That's the wrong speech, that's the sesquicentennial. But we have known each other for 30 years this fall, and that's quite remarkable. So when I talk about creating a space for a dazzling kaleidoscope of perspectives, I could be talking about a dinner party at her house. When I talk about giving voice, I could be talking about her years as a journalist. When I talk about interconnectedness, well, you ought to see her Rolodex. It's astonishing. It is a singular honor for me to welcome to the UVic stage one of my closest friends and a friend to everyone who loves ideas. Please welcome the executive director and the publisher of the Walrus, Shelley Ambrose.
Thank you, Chancellor Rogers, who's one of my best friends, as she just said. I am indeed Shelley Ambrose from the Walrus. It's very good to be back in Victoria. And our first time at UVic for RBC Foundation presents the Walrus Talks Youth Leadership. Hands up if you know about the Walrus magazine. Excellent. Hands up if you've ever been to a Walrus Talks before. Ooh, welcome back. That's fantastic. For those of you who are new to us, the Walrus Foundation, we've got an educational mandate to create forums for the Canadian conversation. Yes, we do that in our magazine. Yes, we do that on our website. And yes, we do that on stages like this from coast to coast to coast. We have 25 Walrus Talks in the country this year. On all of our Walrus platforms, you'll find stories on politics, culture, the environment, business, technology, art, cities, the West, the East, the North, foreign affairs, energy, creativity, water, and much more. The Walrus, as you know, because you're very smart people, a Walrus has no wings. We are not left wing or right wing. We have no wings, and we don't have one single point of view. We're governed by a national board of directors. I think one of my board members, my Victoria board member, is here tonight, Robin McClay. Robin, are you here somewhere? I can't see. Oh, there he is. Hi, Robin. So wherever you are from and however you got here, you're now in very good company because you are now all Walry, which we know is not a word, but we use it anyway. You are Walrus, and that de facto means you are fearless, witty, thoughtful, and curious about Canada and its place in the world. We are supported by donations, subscriptions, circulation, sponsorship, and partnerships, and there's no way we can do the work that we do without partners like RBC and RBC Foundation. RBC has been a valued supporter of the Walrus since our very early days. Their initiatives around water, emerging artists, youth mental health, and so much more mean they are the perfect partner for the Walrus. They're one of Canada's most effective corporate donors. We're really proud to have RBC with us tonight. Please join me in welcoming RBC's Regional Vice President, Mark Lovick.
Thank you, Shelley, and welcome everyone. I'm pleased to bring greetings along with my RBC colleagues, including my boss tonight, Regional President for BC, Graham McLaughlin. RBC is ecstatic to be part of the Walrus event, the Walrus Foundation. And from that, for us, the great part about it is the fact that it allows us to highlight the great things that youth can do. Some of you may not know that we've been part of the Walrus Foundation and the Walrus Talks since 2008. RBC has a long legacy of working with youth and really looking for a way to continue to support young Canadians doing great things. As we get ready to celebrate Canada's 150th birthday, we are excited to celebrate or to continue that legacy by supporting youth in doing great things as we move into the anniversary period by allowing them to do great things with $150. So we're going to take that and we are going to create Make 150 Count and shine a light on the awesome things that youth can do, whether that be feed the homeless, create an art display, support somebody in need, send a youth or a child to a sporting event. It's things like this that help us support you in making Canada great. By supporting youth leaders like this, we can help shape the future, and that's what tonight's about in part of the Walrus Talks. As we move towards Make 150 Count, if you'd like to get involved in that, please Twitter or hashtag Make 150 Count or apply through RBC Online. Very, very pleased to be part of tonight's events. Looking forward to being enlightened by some very, very special speakers and some very, very special very, very special discussions. Enjoy the evening, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark. Make 150 Count. That sounds like fun. I think we can come up with some great ideas for you. As I said, this event wouldn't be possible without RBC and RBC Foundation, and it wouldn't be possible without you, because if you didn't come out, there wouldn't be anyone for the Walrus Talkers to talk to. And we know how valuable your time is, and we're thrilled that you would like to spend some of it with us. We're also live streaming tonight, so I'm welcoming the people watching and listening by live stream. I also want to mention our national partners at Shirk, Shaw, Inspire, and AMIA Aeroplan. They're with us wherever we go, and of course we're very grateful to everyone here at UVic. We've now produced 60 Walrus Talks over the past few years across the country on a million different topics, and tonight, as you know, is about youth leadership, and we're looking forward to hearing our different perspectives, because what does youth leadership actually mean? At the Walrus, it means these are the people who are going to define our country in the future, and these are the people that are going to make the world a better place. And that's fairly important. Here's how the Walrus Talks works. Each of our esteemed speakers has 7 minutes. They know this. They really do. Each one will come up and introduce themselves. There is no MC, so I don't pop up like a jack-in-the-box and read their bios to you. We know you can follow along. The program in your hand is in speaker order. You will see and hear 7 speakers in a row, and if you want to know more about each, flip it over. Their bios are on the back. Just before I get out of their way and let them get started, I would like to thank all of them in advance. Journalist, I would like to say thank you, journalist, author, and human rights activist Sally Armstrong, the Executive Director of Young Entrepreneur Leadership Launchpad, YELL Canada, David Cameron, UVic alumni, and the Director and Lead Designer of the Victoria Hand Project, Joshua Coots, the Director of Jacinta Center for Research and Learning, Erin Freeland Ballantyne, the President and CEO of InSpirit Foundation, Andrea Nemton, the Director and Producer of the documentary Fractured Land, and she's also the Artistic Director of Gen Y Media, Fiona Rayer, and RBC Olympian and Victoria's own super swimmer, Ryan Cochran. Thank you all for coming. Let us begin.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Sally Armstrong. I'm a journalist. I work in zones of conflict, and my beat is to find out what happens to women and girls in places like Afghanistan, Iraq, Somalia, Congo. So what I want to talk to you about tonight is the way young people the world over have become the new change makers. It has to do with the power of personal will. Let me explain what I mean by that. We've always relied on political will and public will to make change. That's not new. You know, the stroke of the politician's pen in order to right the wrongs in our society, or all those petitions we sign, or the marches we go into as a way of public protesting, and that forces, of course, the politician to sign that piece of paper. But something new has come along, something that I've been witnessing as a journalist for the past several years. Maybe it's because girls the world over are fed up with waiting for the politicians to make the changes that need to be made for their own safety. And maybe they're a little riled up about having to march in order to have rape laws observed, or to get their own right to participate in society. Whatever it is, and maybe it's because of the increase in education of girls the world over, the issue of personal will has now taken the stage and is playing a very powerful role in leadership today. Malala Yousafzai would be a great example. You know, Malala, you remember the 15-year-old who was insisted on going to school in the Swat Valley and the stupid Taliban shot her in the head for her trouble? Well, she didn't make world headlines because some politician in the Swat Valley signed a paper saying girls have to go to school. Indeed, nor did she go to school because of a public protest. There was no worldwide protest saying girls in the Swat Valley have got to start to go to school. Malala decided she was going to go to school because she wanted to learn to think for herself, and she went despite the threats from the cowardly Taliban. They shot this girl in the head. They claimed they were doing it in the name of God. Well, Malala went to the hospital and she got better, and she went back to school and she started a movement. Malala has become the world's daughter, and that is an outstanding example of personal will. There's another case I want to tell you about. Maybe you heard about this case, about 160 little girls between the ages of 3 and 17 in Kenya. They sued their government for failing to protect them from being raped. There are laws on the books in Kenya. They call it defilement, and defilement is a crime. But the problem is, men have impunity. Hardly anyone ever gets arrested for rape, and almost nobody goes to jail. But this case started because a 12-year-old girl, 12 years old, called Millie, stood up at a village meeting near Meru, Kenya, and she said, "I want to go to school, but I can't go to school because I'm pregnant, and I'm pregnant because that man sitting over there raped me." This is personal will. And you know, the case is now known as the 160 girls case, and they did win. But when they won it for 10 million girls in Kenya. And now, of course, everyone, politicians, the public, they're all on board because they're trying to retrain the judiciary and alter the lives of girls in Kenya. They have a long way to go, but the journey has begun. And this is because of the personal will of one girl. There's another story I want to share with you. I'm sure you read about the hideous Boko Haram kidnapping 270 girls in Chibok in northern Nigeria. Well, something happened that day that hardly anybody talks about. When US President Barack Obama said he was sending strategic advisors and surveillance equipment to Nigeria to find those girls, he made history. No government, no military has ever in history gone anywhere to rescue girls. The message was clear for the first time. Girls count and education is paramount. Now, although those girls are still, many of them are still missing, and although the story could still have a tragic ending, there's a piece of it that enforced my belief that personal will is the leader. I had to do a story on this, the Boko Haram kidnapping for the Ottawa Citizen, and in that story I interviewed, excuse me, one of the girls who had escaped, and she was 14 years old. She escaped by jumping off the back of a fast-moving truck that was loading those girls into the village and then racing out of the village with them. She jumped off the back of the truck, she rolled into the bush, and she tried to cover herself with debris so that nobody would see her. Well, of course, the Boko Haram thugs saw her jump. They stopped the trucks. They went into the bush with big poles sticking it into the ground to try to find where the girl was hiding. And thankfully, they didn't find her. But my question to her was, where did you get the nerve to jump off the back of a fast-moving truck? Well, she didn't skip a beat. She said, I figured you can only die once. If I stayed on the truck, they'd kill me, so I jumped. But you know, I talked to the villagers about this and said, this is extraordinarily brave. What's going on here? And you know what they told me? They said, these girls are all going to school. They all have plans for themselves. They're all planning to go away to university to learn, to come back and fix the many problems we have here in Chibok. This is also personal will. And this is the kind of leadership that I see in my work as a journalist that is making the biggest change in the world today. Young people are talking in ways they never talked before. The taboo on speaking out about sexual assault has been broken. And everyone knows if you can't talk about it, you can't change it. The girls are talking. And this is the girl talk that's altering the relationship between political will, public will, and all of the rest of us. You see, political will may lag behind, public will may surge ahead, or indeed retreat. But what salvages both of them is the person who stands up and says, this is what I want. That electrifies the public and the political. When you look at this as binary, the political and the public, it needs to be pushed by the personal. The individual who says, it's not okay with me. What you are doing, in my opinion, is wrong. And that is what's driving the bus for the change for girls around the world today. You know, equality law and gender advocacy depend on these individuals. And social media is what is driving the access to their stories. Social media inspires people. It lets us relate to all the details. It gives us the heart and soul of the stories. When we look at Facebook or Snapchat or Twitter or Instagram, we're seeing personal accounts that tell us what's really going on. Not always accurately, but tells us what's going on. And that provides momentum and a much more powerful case for the public to sweep the issue toward political will. You know, I was in Iraq recently on assignment for Maclean's magazine, and I met a lot of young Yazidi girls who are furious that no one came to rescue them when ISIS attacked. They took matters into their own hands, these young girls. They went around trying to raise money so they could buy back their mothers and their sisters who were being held as sex slaves by ISIS. Now they're in refugee camps scattered around the town that I was working from, Duhok. Every tent had a horror story, and their waiting game was indeed an agony. One young girl, Amira Hussein, 14 years old, she has a tattoo on her left arm that says, "Bring back my people." She's wearing a chain around her neck that holds a photo of her missing older brother and says it's so he can always be close to me. She's cynical and she's critical of those who did not help. She said to me, I was taken to what Daesh calls infidel village, along with 3 of my cousins. I was given to an ISIS fighter called Abdullah as a slave. 8 months later, she escaped. But, she says, if the world cared about us, they would have rescued every girl by now, but no one cares. Now that's a pretty tough indictment to hear, but speaking out like this for a young girl is also personal will. They have something to say, and they're going to share it. You know, it's young people like Malala, Millie, and Amira that are in the new change makers today. This is a new brand of leadership in Africa, in Asia, in the Middle East, and indeed right here in Victoria, BC. They're speaking truth to power, because for youth leadership today, power is personal. Thank you.
So hi, my name is David Cameron. And one of the questions that I consistently ask myself is, how do we best support great young leaders in the classroom? And I don't mean your 1 in 1,000 or the Keeners. I mean every single student honing skills, habits, and mindsets of great leadership. And the truth is, answering this question has never been more important. We have global warming, artificial intelligence, space exploration, genome modification, species extinction. We have seemingly insurmountable challenges and wondrous opportunities ahead. And today's youth are more educated than anyone before them, and they have more access to information than you or I ever did. Yet 76% of our high school students leave school feeling unprepared for a career. 13 years, and we pray that the next 4 will solve it, if they go. So, who here has played sports? Artists, musicians. You know, as an aspiring jazz musician, I remember being forced to listen to great jazz music. Or as a track athlete, scouring the internet for every video clip of an Olympian that I could find. And you see, for me, it was like a cheat code. I could observe the best and apply it and improvise upon it myself. So I'd like to take you on a little journey. The first stop in this journey is a story from an exceptional entrepreneur that I heard recently. He was proud of a new hire that he had just made and was discussing this with his board. Then one of his directors spoke up and said, "Talent? Pfft, that's not great talent. I've seen great talent." And you see, the next stop is in my living room because I couldn't shake this story. If exceptional leaders need to see great talent to recognize it, how can you, or how can I, become a great leader if we don't witness it first? And as I was contemplating this question, I was playing with my 9-month-old son, and I would blow in his hair as if he was in the wind. And shortly thereafter, he became obsessed with blowing back at me. I'd wave goodbye at him, and he'd flap his arms and smile back at me. But what began to terrify me is this idea that it's not just these simple behaviors that he was observing and applying to himself. How will his father react in the face of failure or rejection? Would I take the courageous route? Or would he watch me bowing out? So that brings us back to here. We've all heard the phrase, "You know it when you see it." And I'd like to propose the same thing is true of great leadership. But I'd also like to modify this. If you can see it, you can be it. And I don't just mean seeing with your eyes. I mean when you hear stories that ignite your imagination, stories that you can't escape, and stories with the power to change you. I'd like to invite you to imagine a magical fireplace. And around this magical fireplace was a great leader, telling stories of courage, of failure. And hearing these stories were young people. And these young people could ask any question that they want. And they could come back to this place anytime they want. What if that fireplace was our classrooms? The charity that I work for brings great local leaders into classrooms and allows young people to ask any question that they want. And it's making a world of a difference in those classrooms. If the average classroom has 76% of its students leaving feeling unprepared for a career, in these classrooms, it's only 18%. And we're seeing drastic increases in their curiosity, in their courage, in their optimism, and so much more. Their relationship to failure and their self-development habits have fundamentally changed. Now, I'd like to tell one more story. And this is a story about Jack. Jack was 16 when he took our program, took our class. But after he finished, one of his family members was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. And over the course of the next few weeks, he watched the dejected and defeated faces of his family in the face of a seemingly insurmountable blow to their family and to someone they loved. But Jack would have none of that. He knew that to solve great challenges required great leadership. So he enlisted the help of a friend, and with no medical background and no technical expertise whatsoever, he began putting together technology that would ease the stress and the burden placed on family members and caregivers of those with Alzheimer's. He even gained the attention of the National Alzheimer's Society. Now, what really strikes me about this story and what gives me hope is that Jack wasn't the only one who saw great leadership. So too did his family. And now, so too have you. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Dr. Erin Freeland-Valentine, and I am from Yellowknife. And tonight, I'm going to take all of you home with me to Denonday. So I'd like you to imagine that we're under the silvery brightness of the midnight sun, on the shores of a lake so pure that you can drink out of it. Fish that we caught earlier this day from a net is roasting on the fire, and the steam of Labrador tea with rose petals is wafting over our carpet of spruce boughs. Students and elder professors are in a passionate exchange. They're talking about the merits of consensus governance, women's leadership, and decolonization. Suddenly, down in the next space, screaming erupts, the blood-curdling scream of multiple children in total hysteria. Around the fire, we smile at each other, knowingly. See, my workplace is very special. I'm the Dean of Land-Based Education at Deschutes Bush University. We're a land-based university rooted in Indigenous knowledge and values, and our mission is to train the next generation of leaders, researchers, and change makers to build healthy, sustainable, and self-determining communities. Now, I'm a settler. I'm a non-Indigenous person that comes from a mixed Indigenous and non-Indigenous family, and the people around the fire are university students. But they're not your typical university students. See, they're mostly Indigenous women from across the north and beyond, and the screaming kids down the lake are all of our kids, and they're at Kids U. When we built a post-secondary education program to remove barriers for Indigenous student success, the number one barrier identified by students was the lack of affordable childcare and not wanting to remove your kids from their cultural context. So was born Kids U. It's an outdoor, culturally rooted K-12 learning adventure, deschooling, decolonizing education. And get this, kids decide what they want to learn about. So during this particular day, the kids had decided they wanted to make fish spears. They talked to their elder professors and learned about all different kinds of fish spears, how to make them, where to look for fish, what time of day. And we're sitting around the fire in university seminar, and we can hear the kids just screaming in the shallows because they had caught, with their spears and their bare feet, a gigantic 12-pound pike. We run proudly down the trail. They got the fish, and they looked at what it had eaten, learned Indigenous names for fish parts in 5 languages, and feasted. Through that child-led learning journey, they did math to measure spears, researched kinds of wood, spear design engineering, learned stories about fish habitat, biology, ecology, practiced leadership and decision-making, and handled large axes and knives. And we were once told that you can't have higher learning or education in the bush. For 7 years now, we've had university semesters in an off-grid community with participants ranging from 4 months to 93 years old. We've operated from -43 to +37, and for a long time we said the land is our most honored professor. But now I like to say that children on the land are our most honored professors. You see, kids ask the most difficult questions. They have a deeply intuitive sense of justice, and intergenerational learning in community on the land creates a fertile space for knowledge exchange and knowledge creation, indeed, Indigenous innovation. And when we think about necessary national systems change towards reconciliation, I'll let you in on a little secret. Kids and land are key. Now, when I was 24, I got a scholarship to study at Oxford, which is about as far away from Yellowknife as you can get. And 7 months into my scholarship, I found myself going to tell the warden of the Rhodes House, who was indeed a knight, that I was A, pregnant, and B, not quitting my scholarship, where there is a provision to take a year off for military service, but there is no such thing as maternity leave. Now, in the NWT, children are celebrated and loved, but in the UK, amongst grad students and professor, child was the death of tenure track. I was told by a wise professor, dear, an abortion would be much better for your career. So, with my mom, my dad, my family by my side, I started my PhD and gave birth at home 2 weeks later. I was the first woman Rhodes Scholar to have a baby while on stipend, and my daughter Uma turned 10 on Saturday, and she has been a fine teacher. Now, my daughter is a type 1 diabetic, and one day when she's 5, we're driving to school, and we're listening to CBC, and she says, "Mom, what do all the diabetic kids do in Syria when there's so much bombing they can't get their insulin?" And when I'm trying to find an answer, she starts crying in the back seat because she's found her own. And at 6, we're talking about the Oka crisis, and she sums it up like this. "Well, Mom, if I was the mayor of the town, I would just be like, sorry, you can't build a golf course on a graveyard." And when she's 8, she says, Why is Auntie Avonlea, who's Dene, why is she 10 times more likely to go missing and murdered than Auntie Alex because she's white?" See, I've learned from kids that being a leader starts with how you lead your life at home. And if there's not alignment between our values and our work, children don't have an example to follow that is deeply and intuitively truthful. Now, I don't know the answer to all my daughter's questions, but she knows that I'm looking, and she knows that I really care about her future. So the space opened up by the national talk of reconciliation challenges us to lead with our best selves. The opportunity of decolonization is to become the country we always dreamed we were, where the values we use to define ourselves, truth and freedom and inclusivity, resonate with everyone and are reflected in the reality of our institutions, our families, our relationships, and our communities. Kayla Ben says reconciliation is not for cowards, and it's not. It's for lovers and dreamers, because beyond some enlightened notion of reconciliation where somehow everything will be equal, there's a future of equity and beauty. Now in my life, I felt the thundering of thousands of caribou migrating across the not-so-barren lands, and have cried at my son's first hunt, when their first memory is harvesting moose, a species I never harvested until I was an adult because caribou were so abundant. I sent my first email in high school. My youngest son's birth was announced 7 months before he was born with a picture of his first ultrasound on Facebook. You see, things change fast. And right now, we need fast change in our country. And we want authentic leadership. And to do that, I suggest that we look no further than our youth, our children, and our grandchildren. Because our job as young leaders and as leaders who are young at heart is to listen and learn from our youth who reflect back to us the kind of person we are and the kind of society we live in. At the heart of this movement is reconnecting to each other on the land and centering deeply in our lives the core value of interconnection and interdependence with humans, animals, land, water, all that is one. It's time to get outside together. This is a celebration of place as teacher, and where respect of Indigenous sovereignty is not something that is threatening, but something that makes us stronger together. It is a time where each of us is called to live in authentic leadership, in whatever context we put our energy into. For Canada 150, Deshinto will be steering 3 8-week river expeditions of Indigenous and non-Indigenous students, leaders, elders, faculty, artists, and families. And we're hoping to ignite conversations around the country where beyond reconciliation there is reciprocity and action. Spaces like this are critical, so we can talk, listen, share, and act, and we need more of them. At Deshinto, the land-based youth revolution is not just coming, it's here. Please join us. Matthew Cho.
Hello everyone, my name is Joshua Kutz and I'm the lead designer with the Victoria Hand Project. Victoria Hand Project is an organization that designs and develops upper limb 3D printed prosthetics. We have partnerships in Guatemala, Haiti, Nepal, Cambodia, and Ecuador. How our organization is set up is we travel to these regions and we develop 3D print centers. And these 3D print centers are what helps facilitate the delivery of our prosthetics. And not just that, these 3D print centers are also partnered with medical clinics to ensure that trained professionals are delivering our hands and a certain quality of care is being met. So I want to talk to you a little bit about my experience and about the history of VHP. I started this project in my undergrad. At the time, I was presented with the question, could I take a master's project that had sat on the shelf for 10 years and turn it into something practical and useful with the use of 3D printing technology? At the time, I looked at my professor and I said, I have absolutely no idea, but I was willing to try. Now, for those of you who don't know, 3D printing is this incredible technology that essentially allows you to make anything you want out of plastic. So, looking at this hand and realizing it had been sitting for about 10 years, I thought to myself, what can I do to change this into something useful? And it wasn't easy. There's a lot of challenges faced, specifically in how do you make plastic strong enough to be used as a prosthetic hand. But after a few months of design, we came up with our first prototype. And that prototype was taken to Guatemala, where we ran our first trial. The hand wasn't very pretty. The socket wear wasn't very comfortable for our amputees. But we had them being able to pick up small objects, and that for us was a tremendous success. After lots of feedback and a lot of mishaps, we took our design back and we re-engineered it. We work with an incredible group of young, passionate volunteers, engineers at this very university to create something better. We had high school students working in partnership with us to design our fingertips so the hand could better grab something. We integrated incredible technologies such as 3D scanning so that we could have a more comfortable fit with our socket. And using those technologies, we went back down to Guatemala with something better. We came down with something that was more capable, was stronger, was more cosmetically appealing, and it helped suit the needs of the people we were trying to help, and ultimately enabled them to better their lives. So I wanted to talk a little bit just about the VHP team. and about these amazing young engineers that we have working with us. They've worked on all aspects of our project. They've done design, they've done testing, they've even traveled to these amazing regions and worked firsthand with our amputees. They're making sure certain qualities are being met. They're making sure that these 3D print centers know how to design and assemble our hands, and they're ultimately being active. And they're getting behind the idea that young engineers and young minds can create something amazing, can create something powerful. So maybe you might wonder, well, what's the purpose? Why are we doing this? What's our vision for VHP? Whether or not you know it, the majority of people that have a disability or an amputation live in a developing country. And of those people, there's only a small percentage that actually have access to healthcare. And that's what we're trying to change. And that's what all the young minds have gotten behind to try and make a difference. And when you look at what we do and what makes this so special, it's the fact that we're actually traveling to these regions. We're bringing this incredible 3D printing technology so that they are some of the first to have it. We're creating jobs, and jobs that can be used to help sustain a life and create a livelihood, but not only creates a livelihood for the person that's developing these devices and delivering them, but also creates a better life for the person that's getting them by enabling them to do something better. And that could be as simple as having them be able to cook a meal at their house, because now they have two hands to be able to cut and hold food. Or it could be as simple as something like someone that wants to improve their job at work, or even just get a job, something that a lot of us in some ways can take for granted. Then there's the other side of it. Maybe there's the individual who just wants to feel comfortable walking around town. You know, something that, if you're an amputee, is a real world problem. And that's something that you can be walking and be judged just for the fact that you're missing a limb. You can miss a bus just for the fact that you're missing a limb. Where's the fairness in that? So in this organization, we really strive to get this technology to people. And this is just an example of some of the print centers we have where we've given them 3D printing technology. We've given them the means to create something. And probably the most amazing part about this is that using this technology, they can be the first to get the device, not the last, which is so important. So many times when people in these regions are being helped, they're getting something that's used, something that's been refurbished, which isn't ideal. And we strive to give something that's made for them, that's custom fit, that can give them a sense of pride and them a sense of ownership, which is what we strive to do. And not even just that, they get the latest and greatest. They're not behind the developed worlds. They're now ahead of them, which is important for us. Just last week, for example, I was on a Skype call with Haiti, one of our print centers. And I was able to give them our brand new design. They're one of the first in the world to be able to have it. And I could do that through this transfer of technology, for the fact that we've given them the means of 3D printing, and we don't have to worry about rejigging their manufacturing. We don't have to worry about having to train them on something different. It was as easy as a Skype call and an email sent with an electronic file to give them a brand new design. So when we look at what we've done and we look at what all this comes together with, it's the fact that this amazing project is founded on incredible young people that have terrific ideas, that get behind the fact that we're working to change people's lives. We're working to empower them to do something different. And if you can empower someone in a community to better their life, then that just transcends the entire community, and it makes them want to help other people. And it makes them tell them about these amazing endeavors that are going on. And it's not just that. It's also the fact that the way we're going about it is addressing something that's so fundamental. And it's the fundamental aspect of how are we getting our technology to these people, and how are we getting our devices to these people? And that's where you come up with this technology called the delivery gap. And that's something which we at VHP, we've addressed head on by bringing the technology, by getting print centers set up, and by creating a large channel of delivery metrics through all the countries that we work with. Our young people that work on the project are passionate, they've gotten behind this idea, and they keep pushing it forward, and they will continue to keep pushing it forward because they understand how important it is to better people's lives. Thank you.
Hi, thank you. That was amazing. I'm Andrea Nempton. It's lovely to be here home on the West Coast with you all tonight on the traditional territory of the Saanich, Songhees, and Eskimo peoples of the Coast Salish Nation. So, one of the things that I've noticed in the past few years is an increasing number of institutions extending welcomes to young leaders from Indigenous and culturally diverse communities. And this is happening in our funding programs, in our conferences, in our social enterprise circles. As the president and CEO of the Inspirit Foundation, an organization that works towards greater social inclusion through media and arts for change, impact investing, and by supporting young leaders, I think this is a great thing. However, I've witnessed a key oversight in the ways that we're welcoming these young leaders. Frankly, institutional approaches to youth engagement haven't changed a lot since I was young, maybe even longer. And this is an issue because our world has changed, and young people have changed. They're more diverse, and they're facing an incredible range of challenges: environmental, economic, and social. For example, at the organization, at the foundation, we conducted a study called Faces of Canada, and amongst other disheartening facts, we found that over almost 10 million Canadians had experienced discrimination based on their race or religion. 10 million. And that young people were actually reporting even higher rates of these types of discrimination. These are young people between the ages of 18 and 34. Yet, these same young people have incredible capacity. And they've been brought up under multiculturalism, under the promise of multiculturalism and fairness. To them, inclusion isn't an aspiration. It's a promised right. Therefore, the way that we welcome must go beyond representation and truly start sharing power with these young leaders. And by this, I mean institutional power. And I clarify this because a number of the young people that we work with are some of the most powerful individuals I've ever met. Now, the process of sharing power is complex. And so I'd like to share 3 things that we've learned of making this much-needed change in our organization. The first thing we've learned is that placing young leaders in the presence of influencers and experts is no longer enough. And this was a bit of a surprise to me, because as a young environmental activist, when I was invited to the Canada Club or a gala, I was incredibly honored. I mean, I still remember sitting in the audience as somebody imparts their wisdom, and the information was incredibly valuable. Being in the presence of influencers was inspiring. This isn't necessarily true for young people today, because they're so digitally connected, they can have access to information anywhere. And these young leaders respond to 2-way, not 1-way conversations. Today we talk in dialogues, not monologues. In fact, they're hungry to participate. And if they take the time to attend an event, they expect to, especially on issues that impact their lives: Islamophobia, reconciliation, diversity, economic justice. They want to hear from a diverse range of perspectives. And the young leaders we work with, they want to see themselves and they want to engage in new ways. Which leads me to my next learning. We need to intentionally design more inclusive spaces. I'm not suggesting that the role of the keynote isn't valuable. It's just not enough on its own. The traditional stage and audience format is no longer dynamic or equitable enough to engage the young people we work with. Imagine how daunting it must be to contribute to difficult or deeply personal conversations in a Q&A at a formal event. This design approach really only works for extroverts or people who have incredible experience in these kinds of situations. That's why it's important to intentionally design in a manner that creates space for smaller group discussions, for one-on-one exchanges, for knowledge sharing from everyone, and for some critique. It's simple, really, like all of us. The young leaders we work with want to be heard. And so we have to be prepared to both listen and learn, especially when challenged. As institutional leaders, we must recognize that making an invitation to young people will sometimes expose our assumptions and lack of understanding. This is especially true if we don't have lived experience on the issue. And in fact, young people are the experts on their own lives. And so we must be ready to have our own ideas disproved or expanded upon. Now, this can be difficult. This is difficult to do because receiving constructive criticism, and sometimes not constructive criticism, is challenging. But demonstrating an openness to grow and remaining empathetic is important role modeling. Finally, in order to truly move beyond representation to sharing power with young leaders, we must be accountable both personally and systemically. We have the responsibility to acknowledge that the value of what we've learned and articulate how we will use it. When possible, young leaders should have the opportunity to inform and directly contribute to the program design and decision-making. This will help us to be more transparent and responsive institutions. As people in positions of leadership, we are able to share what we've learned in policy and decision-making circles. And then there's the human element. No two young leaders are the same. And it's important to take the time to really get to know people. And it's so worth it. In the past 5 years, I've had the opportunity to do just that. And here are some of the young leaders that I hold myself accountable to. Thank you.
Well, it's great to be here. My name is Ryan Cochran. The last time I was here was high school graduation. I missed my university grad, so I might just strut across the stage later if I feel like it. I'm a 3-time Olympian and 2-time Olympic medalist, and I've been lucky to represent Canada for over 10 years now. And I'm actually here on behalf of the RBC Olympians program. And it's a program that allows athletes like myself to interact with the community and really talk about excellence and leadership through sport. But I think youth leadership is so important, and I'm very excited to add to a great panel here tonight. Unlike many of the speakers here, this probably isn't going to be the most academic, even though I did go to UVic. I probably should have thought of that before I came back to UVic for that. But that's not to say that what I do doesn't take, an incredible amount of introspection and constant thought. My journey to leadership really started at about 17 years old when I was on my first time competing for Canada. And swimming is an individual sport. It really is. Back and forth every day, we see that black line. But it's something that I always wanted to stand out at because it was an individual sport. It's probably what drew me to it in the first place. That's not by being loud, abrasive, kind of in-your-face leadership, although some of my teammates definitely fit that mold. Instead, I've always tried to find that success in what I do. So I was fortunate to qualify for my first Olympic Games at 19 years old, and representing Canada is the best thing in the world, but I had dreamed about that since I was about 6 years old, and that's an incredibly long time. 13 years of that dream to reality, it's it's long, well, maybe not now that I look back on it, but every year I was aware of what my goal was, every month, every day. I knew what I was working towards pretty much that entire time. So by the time I got to the Beijing Olympics, I knew what my goal was. I knew what I was there to do, and that was to win a medal. I was lucky to be able to stand on that podium and reach my goal, but there was an underlying cost, I would say at the time, that I wasn't aware of. And I was thrust into the role of leader at 19 years old when I really wasn't ready for it. And to be honest, that made me very uncomfortable. It was like my bio read as a leader on the Canadian team. I think they said it every single time I ever had an accomplishment. And I was there to swim. So to act like a leader was really terrifying. At the time, I always thought I had to have the right answers for things. And little did I know, no one was expecting me to say the right thing. Everyone just wanted me to be a positive influence and to really continue to do well. Because I felt like those proper words always escaped me, I decided to lead by example. And by no means was I perfect. I'm quite the cynic. I'll be completely honest. I complain as much as anybody, but I know what it takes to be the best in the world at what you do. And I've always tried to lead by that. I'm aware of my goals. I don't forget them when the years get tough. I know the emotional side of sport can be, one of the worst things in the world. But I try to utilize my entire team. I ask for help. We have a team of 10 people that make us better. And I know each and every one of my teammates and my team can add something to my life, even though I was thrust in that leadership role. It's been about 8 years since my experience in Beijing, and my outlook on leader has changed quite dramatically. And don't get me wrong, I still try to lead by example. I remember that I don't have to be perfect to be a leader in the first place, but I think perfection doesn't really exist. So you just try to be the best kind of athlete you can be. I never let myself forget what it takes to continue to be successful in what I do. I'm always learning, I'm always asking for feedback, and I'm trusting all those people around me. During these last few summers, I've been very lucky to be a captain on our team, and I take great pride in being a captain, especially on this Olympic team. This team we had in Rio was so successful, and really just the pride was overwhelming, even though my results weren't really where I thought I'd like them to be. But these past couple summers, it was the first time that I could lead by example, but I also wanted to be very vocal in my role as a leader. I needed to know what that messaging would be. I think with experience, anybody can help those people around them. And during these games in Rio, as I look back, it's funny, it's my favorite experience as an athlete, although the results weren't quite there. Before the games, I had this epiphany. It goes back to when I started doing events like this and public speaking, and I thought I had to relate to every single group that I talked to, which is pretty difficult when you're talking to realtors, financial advisors, a group like this, and fellow athletes. So I think I've learned that the messaging and what we do is so cross-cultural. I learned it's great to lead by example, but I can help in a much greater way. When I spoke to our team this summer, especially some of our younger athletes, 15 years old, at Olympic Games, I talked about my own Olympic experiences, fears I had, what was exciting, what I regretted, but seeing women like Penny Oleksiak win 20 Olympic medals at 15, 16 years old, I'm gonna say we're at fairly different points in our lives. But seeing that success and being able to contribute in a small way and hopefully leaving a legacy in sport makes these games my absolute favorite. Looking back, I'm most proud of the success and how that'll influence next generations. And leading by example, but then becoming a positive role model is something I think I'll really hold close to my heart. I think legacy isn't something that I ever thought about until I was in my mid-20s, but I'm lucky my career spanned longer than those first couple years. When we speak about youth leadership, we speak about all of our different generations and how they see the world differently. And I believe our goals are all the same nonetheless. In order to inspire, you must know what your goals are. You never have to stop working towards them, and you need to know what you're working on that year, on that month, on that day. By learning from my failure, I think I've gained an incredible amount of knowledge that's made me a better person, both in and out of the water, but I think that's helped me learn that leadership is absolutely what you make of it. It can be internalized, much like how I started as a leader on our team, and it can be externalized when you're more comfortable with that message that you want to get across. Wherever life takes me, both in and out of sport, I now realize that I definitely leave a mark on the world. Whether that mark is through sport, education, or your career, I don't really think it matters. Just be aware of that and make the most of that influence no matter what age you're at. Thank you.
I don't know how to do anything. That's what I feel like listening to these. Yeah, I'm thinking, I am so old. Looking at these people, I would like you to join me in thanking all of our speakers. We'll thank them all together. Sally Armstrong, a champion of girls and women. David Cameron and his imaginary fire. Joshua Coots, who's, I think your project should be called Young Minds Without Borders, because there's always a group without borders, but 3D printing without borders, I don't know. You should have a Dr. Borders there. Erin Freeland Ballantyne, who kind of skipped over really fast that she's the first Rhodes Scholar from the Canadian Arctic, which is amazing, wants us to lead with our best selves. Fiona, I think that guy, where are you, Fiona? I think that guy owes you a lot. I know you owe him a lot, but I do think he owes you a lot. And congratulations. And Brian, I want Chancellor Rogers to make a date with you so you can get your degree on this stage from Chancellor Rogers. Would you do that for us? Yes, okay, that would be great. And Andrea Nemton, we don't have a Q&A, but we have a reception. And we always have a post-talks reception because we believe that you want to talk to the talkers one-on-one. So to that end, I'm going to ask our talkers to up, everyone else if you could stay seated. I'm going to send them off into the reception first because you want to do that thing where you come down and trap them in the front row and then they never get a drink or they can't do anything. So we're not going to let you do that. They're going to go out first. Thank you, everyone. And I'm just going to keep you for a couple of extra seconds because I want to tell you a couple of things. We have 3 more Walrus talks in this season. We're going to Edmonton in a few weeks, and we have 2 in Calgary. If you can't join us in person, you can always listen by live stream, or you can go back in time and watch about 350 7-minute Walrus talkers on our YouTube channel at your leisure, free and on demand. When we go into the reception, I would love it if you would approach the Walrus table. 2 reasons. 1, you can subscribe to the magazine there. And let's face it, subscribing saves you time and money. It shows your love for your community. It's very hard to be Canadian if you don't read the Walrus. This is just simply true. Also at that table, you can sign up for our newsletter, which is free and takes 3 seconds. And if you sign up for our newsletter, Kaylin from the Walrus will hand you your free copy of the Walrus magazine. But you have to sign up to the newsletter to get it. And the second happy thing that happens when you sign up to the newsletter is tomorrow you will get a very special email asking you to reserve your seats as a newsletter subscriber to our Canada 150 national tour of the Walrus Talks. 13 provinces and territories, 13 weeks. We are taking 50 youth leaders and 50 members of the Order of Canada on the road. Tickets are free, but you have to reserve them. And guess what? You can only reserve them if you opt for the newsletter. Yes, so please just do that. There is food at the reception, there is drink at the reception, and if you are there, there will be a wonderful conversation. Thank you very much, Mark Lovick, and everyone at RBC and RBC Foundation for your support in making tonight possible. Thank you, Chancellor Sheila Rogers, and the entire team at UVic for hosting us. Our national partners, Shirk, Inspire, Shaw, AMIA Aeroplan, of course, the Walrus event team, David Leonard, Blair Elliott, Kaylin Cooper, and Leanne Stepnow. Thank you all for coming. See you at the reception. Good night. Safe home.